When you sleep. I used to think waking up at the same time every night was just some weird coincidence. Maybe my body had its own alarm clock, maybe I drank too much water before bed. But after the third or fourth time, when I opened my eyes in the middle of the night and saw my phone screen glowing in the darkness, 3:13 a.m. exactly, I started to feel uneasy. It wasn't like I woke up groggy or restless. No, it was always the same. Wide awake. Heart racing. A feeling like I had just done something I couldn't remember. I lived alone in a small apartment in Chicago, the kind where the walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor's microwave beep. Nothing fancy. Just a bed, a desk, and a closet that always creaked when I opened it. My job kept me up late sometimes, but I wasn't one of those guys who suffered from insomnia or night terrors. At least, I never used to. Until I noticed the pattern. 3:13 a.m. every night. At first, I brushed it off. Just stress. Just routine. Maybe even some subconscious habit I didn't know about. But then, I started feeling strange. Like the kind of tired that sticks to your bones, even when you sleep. I'd wake up in the morning with my sheets kicked off, sometimes even sitting up in bed, like I had fallen asleep in the middle of something. A couple of times, I found my bedroom door open when I was sure I had closed it. That's when I decided to record myself. It was stupid, really. I figured I'd wake up, check my phone, and see myself rolling over in bed or scratching my nose. Something normal. Something boring. I didn't expect anything else. But when I woke up that next morning, feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion pressing down on me, I grabbed my phone with a sense of unease I couldn't shake. I scrolled to the video file, hesitated for a second, then pressed play. At first, nothing happened. The screen was dark, the only movement coming from the slow rise and fall of my own breathing under the dim glow of the streetlights outside. I fast-forwarded a little. Still nothing. Just me, asleep. But then, right at 3:13, my body twitched. My fingers flexed. My head jerked slightly, like someone had whispered my name right into my ear. And then, I sat up. I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched myself in the video. There was something unnatural about the way I moved, like I was being pulled upright rather than waking up. My head turned slowly, like I was listening to something. Then, without hesitation, I swung my legs over the bed, stood up, and walked straight to the door. I opened it and stepped into the hallway. And then, the worst part. The video didn't end there. The camera kept rolling, pointing at my empty bed. The sheets were rumpled, the pillow slightly indented where my head had been. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Just stillness. And then, movement. A shadow in the hallway. A figure stepping into the room, slowly, deliberately. The shape was just barely visible in the dim light, but I could see it. It was a person. A man, maybe. But I couldn't make out any features. He walked to my bed. He hesitated for just a second, as if making sure I wasn't there. And then, he laid down. Right where I had been sleeping. The video ended. I stared at the screen, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. My mind tried to come up with a reasonable explanation, but nothing made sense. Who was that? How did they get in? And why the hell did I leave? Where did I go? I swallowed hard and forced myself to get up, my legs shaky as I moved toward the bedroom door. It was closed. Locked. Just like I had left it the night before. I turned slowly, scanning the room. Everything looked normal. The bed. The desk. The closet. But it didn't feel normal. It felt wrong. Like something was off, just slightly. And then, I saw it. A single indent on my pillow. Like someone's head had been resting there. Still warm. I didn't go to work that day. I didn't even leave my apartment. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, replaying the video over and over again like I had missed something, some trick of the light, some camera glitch, some logical explanation that would make this less terrifying. But no matter how many times I watched it, it stayed the same. I left. Someone else entered. And then they laid in my bed like they belonged there. The worst part wasn't even the fact that I had walked out of the room with no memory of it. It wasn't even that a complete stranger had somehow gotten in. It was the way they moved. Slow. Deliberate. Like they had done this before. Like they knew exactly where to go, exactly how to settle into the spot I had just left, as if they were simply waiting for their turn. I wanted to tell myself it was a sleep disorder. Sleepwalking. Some rare form of parasomnia, maybe. But that didn't explain the man in my bed. It didn't explain why my sheets were still warm when I woke up, as if I had only just left. And it sure as hell didn't explain the feeling that was starting to creep into my chest, the sickening realization that this had probably been happening for longer than I knew. I had only just noticed the pattern of waking up at 3:13, but what if I had been leaving my bed long before I ever thought to record it? I checked my phone's photo album, scrolling frantically through old videos, old pictures. Nothing. Just normal, stupid snapshots of food, street views, random selfies I had taken months ago. But when I opened my call log, my stomach clenched. There was a call made from my phone at exactly 3:15 that morning. I didn't recognize the number. I called it back, hands clammy, pulse hammering in my throat. The dial tone rang once, twice, then silence. A voice picked up, but it wasn't a greeting. It wasn't even a person speaking. It was just breathing. Slow. Heavy. Like someone was listening. I hung up immediately, my breath coming in sharp gasps. My first instinct was to get the hell out of there. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, my jacket, anything I could shove into my pockets, and stormed out of the apartment, barely remembering to lock the door behind me. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to be around people, in the daylight, somewhere that didn't feel like a trap. I ended up in a diner a few blocks away, the kind that served watery coffee and eggs that always tasted slightly burnt. The place was mostly empty, just a couple of old guys reading newspapers and a waitress who looked like she had seen some shit. I slid into a booth in the corner, ordered a coffee, and pulled out my phone again. I don't know why I did it, but I opened the call log once more. The number was still there, staring back at me like an accusation. My thumb hovered over it. I knew it was a bad idea, but something in me needed to know. I pressed dial. This time, there was no ringing. No delay. Just a voice that answered immediately, like it had been waiting. You shouldn't have left. I dropped the phone. My stomach twisted into knots so tight, I thought I was going to throw up right there in the booth. The voice hadn't been loud. It hadn't been angry. It was just calm. Almost disappointed. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip it. The call had ended. No missed call. No trace of it ever happening. I sat there for a long time, gripping my coffee like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I needed answers. I needed proof. That night, I set up more cameras. Not just my phone. I borrowed an old laptop from a friend and positioned it in the corner of my room, facing the door. I placed another camera in the hallway, just outside my apartment, aimed directly at my door. If someone was getting in, I was going to see how. If I was leaving, I was going to see where the hell I went. I stayed awake as long as I could, watching the clock tick past midnight, past 1, past 2. My eyelids felt like lead weights, but I forced them open, determined to catch whatever was happening in real time. But at some point, exhaustion won. My head sagged forward. My vision blurred. Sleep took me, dragging me under like an unseen current. And then, just like every other night, I woke up. 3:13. The room was dark. My body felt stiff. My mouth was dry, my skin cold with sweat. I reached for my phone, fingers fumbling to open the camera app, to check the recordings. But before I could even lift the screen to my face, I saw something in the dim light. The closet door was open. Just slightly. And I knew, with a deep, sinking certainty, that it hadn't been open when I went to sleep. I couldn't breathe. My throat felt tight, as if the air itself had become too thick to get through. I tried to steady myself, blinking rapidly, but the image didn't shift. The door was open. It was barely a crack, but it didn't belong that way. I was sure of it. I tried to force myself to get up, but my limbs felt like lead. My body ached from being half drowned in a restless sleep, yet there was something else weighing me down, a deeper, heavier sensation that told me to stay in bed. To stay perfectly still. My heart was thudding in my chest now, loud enough that it almost felt like someone else was in the room with me, feeling the same pounding beat. I turned my head slowly, not wanting to make a sound, but needing to confirm what I already feared. The hallway outside my door was dark. Too dark. But my eyes were fixed on the sliver of light beneath the closet door. It was just enough to make the shadows twist and stretch unnaturally across the floor, like the room was holding its breath. For a moment, everything felt so still. So absolute. It was as if time had stopped, and I was suspended in this horrible, heart-stopping moment, unable to move, unable to breathe. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to do, but my body refused to let me leave the bed. Then, like a bolt of lightning, it happened. A creak. The kind of sound you'd expect from the oldest house in the neighborhood, the kind of sound that only happens when someone, has been waiting for you to hear it. The closet door moved. Just a little more. It didn't open all the way, but that didn't matter. Someone was inside. The door was shifting on its own, and I wasn't moving. My mouth went dry again, my pulse spiking like a sudden surge of electricity. I couldn't understand why I couldn't just get up, why my limbs felt like they were paralyzed. I knew I had to get out of there. I knew I had to run, but I couldn't. The creak of the door happened again. Closer now. Not from the closet, but from within the closet. I didn't move. I couldn't. But my eyes never left that sliver of light beneath the door. I couldn't look away. If I did, I knew I would miss it. A shadow, no, something, moved in the dark, stepping closer to the crack. Something human-shaped, but somehow not quite human. The silhouette was wrong. Too tall. Too long. It wasn't just a shadow of someone standing still. It was moving. It was reaching for the door, slowly, impossibly, as if testing the air in the room before it emerged. My heart was hammering so loud now that it drowned out everything else, the sound of the air conditioning, the muffled street noise outside, everything except the movement in that closet. I didn't know what I was waiting for. I didn't know if I should scream, run, or pretend this was all a dream. I wasn't even sure I could make a sound. It was then that I heard it. The faintest, most gentle scraping sound. Like something being dragged along the floor, just behind the door. I didn't have to see it to know what it was. I could feel it. It was too real. Too close. I thought I was going to die right there. I thought this was it, this was the moment. But then, something shifted. Something in the dark moved again, the shape within the closet retreating just a little, pulling back into the shadow. It was like it had felt me watching it, and now it was playing with me. I didn't know how long I stayed there, trapped in that frozen state of waiting. It felt like hours, but I knew it couldn't have been. I knew I had to do something, but fear had completely taken over my body, seizing me into a paralysis of terror. Finally, I broke free. My body jolted into action. I reached for my phone, desperate to grab the camera, to catch whatever was in that closet. But just as my hand brushed the edge of the screen, I saw it, the shape was gone. I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. It didn't matter, though. Because when I checked the camera roll, all I saw was a dark screen. No footage. Nothing. The camera had stopped recording. It was gone. Whatever was there, whatever had been in my room with me, it was gone. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't make sense of it. But I knew that whatever happened that night, whatever had been creeping around my room, waiting for me to fall asleep, it wasn't over. And it was never going to be. I thought of the call, of the voice that had whispered to me the night before. The same voice, the one that had said I shouldn't have left. It still lingered in my mind. And now, it had me questioning everything. Every step I took. Every sound I heard. Every shadow that passed by the corner of my eye. What the hell had I gotten myself into? I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. I couldn't stay in that room. But there was no escape from the feeling that I had been marked, that something had attached itself to me. The whispers didn't stop. I could still hear them. The voice on the phone. The voice in my head. You shouldn't have left. And this time, I couldn't shake the feeling that the thing I had been running from was closer than ever. I couldn't shake the thought that the nightmare I had thought was over was just beginning. As the days dragged on, I found myself staring at the walls of my apartment, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. The apartment felt the same as it had before, quiet, mundane, almost suffocating in its normalcy. Yet, I could never escape the tight knot in my chest, the sense that something was watching me. It was as if whatever had been in that closet hadn't left, it was still there, lingering, waiting. I couldn't even sleep anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that scraping sound. That awful sound of something being dragged across the floor. It echoed in my mind, growing louder, more frantic. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, convinced that I wasn't alone. That thing was still here. And I couldn't figure out why it hadn't shown itself again. At night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the inevitable. It was almost as if I was daring it to show itself, daring the shadows to swallow me whole. I knew it was just a matter of time. The same thoughts plagued me. What had it been? Why had it come? And why did I feel so connected to it now? It wasn't until one night, another sleepless, oppressive night, that I finally realized what I needed to do. I had to confront it. I had to go back to the beginning, to the place where it all started. The closet. The door that had creaked open, revealing that horrifying silhouette. The place where it had all unfolded. Maybe if I went back there, I would understand what had happened. Or maybe I'd finally get the closure I so desperately craved. I couldn't do it alone. I knew that much. I called a friend, someone I could trust, someone who didn't think I was completely losing my mind. His name was Jack. He was skeptical, but he knew me well enough to understand that something wasn't right. When I explained what had happened, he said he would come over the next night. We would figure this out together. The night Jack arrived, I could barely look him in the eye. I had told him everything, but now that he was here, I wasn't sure how to explain the feeling that had settled in my bones. The air in the apartment was thick, charged. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in on us, and I was waiting for that scrape to start again. That noise. That presence. I led him to my bedroom. I didn't need to say anything. He could feel it too, the way the room felt colder than it should be, the way the shadows seemed to grow longer with every passing minute. I don't know what Jack was expecting, but I could see it in his eyes, doubt. He didn't believe me. Not yet. We stood in silence, both of us facing the closet. I had to take a deep breath before I even spoke. You don't understand, I said, my voice trembling. Something is in there. It was in there. And I think it's still here. Jack just shook his head, but he stepped closer, looking down at the floor. Are you sure you're okay? Maybe you've just been too stressed out, you know? This could be your mind playing tricks on you. I wanted to scream at him, but I knew he was right. I did feel like I was losing my mind. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. But the feeling in my gut was undeniable. Something had changed. Something was off. Then, without warning, the temperature dropped. It wasn't gradual, like the air conditioning kicking on. It was a sudden, violent change, like the room had just been plunged into winter. Jack shivered, his breath visible in the air. He turned to me, eyes wide, but I could only stare at the closet. I could feel it. I could feel the weight of it. Something was there. Watching. Waiting. Then I heard it. That scraping sound. It was softer now, like a distant whisper, but it was unmistakable. I felt my heart race again, the blood draining from my face as the sound inched closer to us. It wasn't coming from the closet. It was coming from inside the room. "Jack," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't respond. He just stood there, frozen in place, eyes locked on the closet door. I felt like I was suffocating as the air grew colder and colder. Then, the door to the closet creaked open. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. But Jack did. He stumbled back, falling into the bed, his eyes wide with disbelief. Something moved inside. I couldn't see what it was, but I could feel it. I could feel the weight of its presence, like something alive in there, waiting to step out into the light. I grabbed Jack's arm, pulling him away, but it was too late. The thing that had been following me, had already taken form. And as it emerged from the shadows of the closet, I saw it for the first time. It was tall. Unnaturally tall. Its limbs were long, but they weren't right. They were too thin, too stretched, like it had been grown into a shape that didn't belong. The figure's skin was a sickly, pale gray, stretched taut over its bones. And its face was hollow. There were no eyes, just dark pits, as if it had been carved out of the darkness itself. The only thing that moved was its mouth. It twisted into a grin, but it wasn't a grin I recognized. It was something else entirely. "You shouldn't have left." The voice, a rasping whisper, came from its mouth. The same voice from the phone. From the darkness. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. I could barely move as it stepped closer, its long fingers reaching out toward us. It reached for me first. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Jack and I stood there in stunned silence, my mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The room was still. No sound. No movement. But we both knew it wasn't over. The thing was gone, for now. But the whispers? They didn't stop. I could still hear them. And I knew, deep down, that whatever it was, whatever had been haunting me, it wasn't finished yet. And neither was I. We stood in silence, only our breathing breaking the eerie silence. I couldn't tell if what we were seeing was real or if it was just a horrible illusion our minds had created out of fear. I looked at Jack, and his face was pale, he was gasping for air nervously, as if trying to come to his senses. But I knew I would never forget what we had just experienced. You saw that, right?" I asked, trying to gather some clear thought in my head. His eyes were wide open, and his lips were trembling with emotion. The answer he would give couldn't change what had happened. It had already become a part of us, a part of something that could not be explained in words. But still. I don't know what it was, but it was real. His voice was broken. "You're right. Something's wrong here." We stood there, staring into the void. The room was the same, but the atmosphere had changed. Something was in the air now, like a heavy cloud that made it hard to breathe. They say fear has no face, but that's not quite true. It's what you see in the dark, what you feel in front of you, and what you want and don't want to notice at the same time. And right now, I felt it everywhere. No one said a word as we returned to the very place where it had all begun. Every step we took down this familiar but now strange corridor felt too loud, too real. And again, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was leading me, not me. We reached the door to my room, but something had changed. All these days, when I had been here alone, I had felt like the chosen one, trapped by this secret that held me. Now, I felt that this secret was something more, something terrible. And when we got back to the room, I felt a chill run down my spine. It looked normal, even cozy, but I knew it was just an illusion. My hand reached for the doorknob, but I stopped. That night I had reached a point where fear was no longer just a physical sensation. It was something more. Maybe I couldn't tell what was real and what was my mind anymore. All this time I had tried to put it behind me, stubbornly believing that it was just a dream, a nightmare that would soon pass. But why couldn't I shake this feeling? That something was watching, that I would never be alone in this room. And then we both heard a sound. Light but distinct, like the rustling of something moving inside the room. Jack nodded toward the bed. We both saw the same thing, where there had been emptiness, there was now something under the covers. Something that shouldn't have been there. It was our last night.